Welcome back to Change Ed,
Changed.
the #1 world-renowned education podcast for educators by educators. And Patrice, together, we're changing the landscape of education one episode at a time. This is one of those episodes where we're going to change the landscape of education. I guarantee it.
Still fuzzy on where you get your stats from.
Even if it doesn't happen, I'm going to make it happen.
Okay.
I don't know how it's going to happen. All right. I am your host, Andrew Kuhn, education consultant from Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, also known as the #1 change agent in Montgomery County.
Come on, bro. You
Here with
stole
me
my thing. Patrice. Summer check. I was getting ready to be like change agent out of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, but you stole it.
But you could be a changed agent.
That was not cool. Now, I had it all figured out in my head, and we all know from listening to 20-some episodes, I never remember what I do.
Right.
I had it all teed up, and you like...
I apologize. Next episode. Wow. I'll do better. We are excited to have here with us for this episode.
Poor Ron.
As a... Poor Ron. No stranger to our work here in Pennsylvania, in a territory larger than Pennsylvania, also having taught and worked a lot in New Jersey as well. Here with us from Activate Learning, which is a full service provider of Open SciEd, is Ron Antinori. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you for having me today.
Thanks for being here.
We're super thrilled to have you here. And Ron, you are a good friend of the IU. You've done a lot of work here with us and within the state of Pennsylvania. I know that your territory is bigger than Pennsylvania. You've had a lot of work that you've done and even a lot of experience with science and with these shifts that have come along here in Pennsylvania. There are STEELS standards. I'm wondering if you could just give us a little bit of background about yourself and kind of introduce yourself to the Change Ed Nation.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I am a retired science teacher. My first 4 years of teaching were high school in New York City. Then I moved to New Jersey, where I became a middle school science teacher for 16 years. And after 20 years in the classroom, I guess teachers would say I went to the dark side and became a Sith Lord, or AKA science supervisor. And I did that for 12 years. In 2017, I had 32 years in, and I decided to retire. In my 32 years, though, I did have a stop along the way in the state of Pennsylvania, where I worked at the Chester County Intermediate Unit as the staff development specialist in science. So I was there for a couple of years before I made my way back here to the neighboring state of New Jersey. Once I retired, I started working for Activate Learning in 2017, and I've been with them for 7 years. In large part, I chose Activate Learning because we had been using one of their middle school programs at the school district I retired from. And when I saw the difference it was making in the lives of the teachers and students, I said, if I do anything outside of being associated with the public school district, it would be working for these guys. And so lo and behold, here I am 7 years later, still with Activate Learning.
That's awesome.
Now, doing quick math here, in 2017, I know the NGSS have been around for almost 11 years now. So were you still actively working in New Jersey when they were transitioning over to incorporating the NGSS?
Yes. And so it's really nice to be in Pennsylvania speaking with teachers because I can totally relate to what they're feeling, the anxiety they're feeling, the nervousness they're feeling, some of the confusion that they may be feeling, and maybe even some of the resistance that they are feeling in regards to the new standards, having lived through it in New Jersey with my teachers. So in 2013, as you said, Andrew, was the time that NGSS came about, and New Jersey was a lead state, and so we adopted NGSS rather quickly. And I remember the facial expressions on my teachers when they first looked at NGSS. And they were like, what is this three-dimensional teaching? What is meant by phenomena? I often use the example of they read the practice that says students will develop and use a model. And in their mind, they thought of, we make candy models of cells in biology. So we do modeling.
Right.
Oh, and in 8th grade, they make Bohr models of atoms and I hang them from the ceiling. And so we're doing modeling. And in 5th grade, we make dioramas of the solar system. So we're doing modeling. And I'm like, I don't think that's what the standards mean when they say develop and use a model.
Yeah.
So I can relate to what's going on in the minds of teachers and administrators all across the state of Pennsylvania right now, having walked in those shoes 11 years ago in your neighboring state of New Jersey.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I have talked about, Ron, offline, obviously when we were recording this podcast, that I think would be super helpful for our audience to consider and to even hear is your perspective as an administrator through this process. And you were sharing some of your connections and even lessons learned from working with the stakeholders and working within the community as we transition to NGSS, well, specifically for yourself in New Jersey, and then as we're doing it here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so one of the things I've been telling administrators as much as I can is don't make the mistake that I made. I made a critical mistake when we made the shift to NGSS. And so I'm going to start with a brief story here. One of the places where we decided to make the shifts first was with our brightest freshmen. And so I was sitting in my office probably sometime in October, and one of the brightest freshmen knocks on my door, says, "You're the science supervisor. Do you have a few minutes to talk to me?" And I said, "Sure." And so this student had a seat. I recognized her, being that she happened to be in like the top 50 kids in the whole district. And I said, "How can I help you?" And she says, "Well, I have physics," because we were physics first district. And so she was a ninth grader. And she said, "I have Mrs. So-and-so." And she said, "I don't think she knows anything."
Oh, no.
I said, "Wow, okay, you don't think the teacher knows anything?" And I said, "What else?" And she said, "And I'm not learning anything." I said, "Wow. So as a supervisor, I certainly don't want to hear something like this. But can you tell me a little bit more of why you say that Mrs. So-and-so doesn't know anything?" And she said, "Well, every single time we ask her a question, she asks us what we think. I don't think she knows the physics." And of course, on the inside, I'm laughing, but I'm also crying at the same time. Because what it said to me is we need to do a better job in my district of getting the brighter kids, and all the kids for that matter, not to associate good teaching with good telling. Because basically what she was saying is from K to 8, I've played school very well. It got me to be one of the brightest students. And the way I play school is you tell me things. I write them down and I give them back to you. Now all of a sudden you're asking me to think? That's not the way this works. And so I had to explain to her that the teacher is teaching in a new way, in which case she went home and told her parents about this. And then I started getting phone calls from her mom and other moms. And so I had a parent night, and that didn't go so well because this is my advice to you. Get out ahead of this.
Yeah.
Be proactive. In other words, not only are these pedagogical shifts huge for the teachers, they're going to be massive for your students, especially the brighter students who are going to probably resist the fact that they now have to think. And so we scheduled a parent night, and I said that didn't go too well. It lasted for like 2.5 hours when it was supposed to be about an hour.
Wow.
And it's
That's how you know it didn't go well. 2.5 hours, yeah.
Right. And, this is into 8:30 at night. People are still in there, and we started sometime around 6. And, we tried to explain to the parents that we're teaching in a different way and be prepared for this, especially with your college educated, maybe post-college educated parents. And the parents of these students, most of them fell into that realm. So I'm having the parent night, right? And I'm explaining everything to them. And all of a sudden I get the following question. "So I hear what you're saying, Mr. Antinori, about, this is based in the latest research and all that, but I got to tell you something. I'm a very successful engineer, and I didn't learn science this way." And then all of a sudden, other people in the room started going, "Yeah, and I'm a doctor, and I didn't learn this way, and I'm really successful as well. I'm also an engineer, and I didn't learn this way. And so I don't want my son or daughter to learn this way." Now, how would you answer that question? Would you say, "Well, I'm sorry, but that's what the new Steele standards call for"? I guess that's one way we could say it. So, if you don't like it, I guess move your child to a private school. I mean, what's the alternative to that?
Right.
So I think we need to be proactive, get out ahead of this is my recommendation. Have a parent night prior to the start of the new school year and explain to them the shifts, but maybe also engage them in some fun learning activities so that they can experience it themselves and realize that, okay, although my child's been asked to think, this is really good, and, get them to buy into this a little bit. So I'll tell you how I responded to that question, by the way, and I don't know if it's the best way to respond, but I said,
"Get out of here, buddy."
Go to private school.
Yeah, right. It really is a tough question, right? So I said, well, since we were in school, there's a lot of brain research that has come out that says how children learn best. And we are going to root and make our decisions here based on two things. Is this in the best interest of students, and is there data or research to support it? So there's data and research to support this way of teaching. Glad you learned well that way, but that doesn't work for every child. In fact, I think there's something like only 5% of the whole entire population actually ends up majoring in a STEM career. So we need to do better as a nation, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide your child with the best possible education in science. I know you want that, and I know we want that as a science staff, and certainly as a science supervisor, I want that. So that was kind of my response. I think it kind of subdued the crowd a little bit, but I wish I would have had them engage in an activity. So I would recommend doing that, which I didn't do that night.
What's interesting, Ron, is that I was writing down a response as you were asking that question. I was like, here's what I would say. I literally wrote down, we've learned a lot about the brain and development. So we were in sync with that, which I think is the reality, right? And we've learned enough that what were best practices at one point in time are now kind of outdated. Not that they're obsolete, because they're not, but some of them are outdated as in, this might be the only solution. This is the only way we do it. And now we've learned so much about universal design for learning and how to involve more learners and how to get more people included in the learning from the beginning so they can be part of the conversation. I thought it was a spot-on response. The other thing I thought of is that we are intentionally trying to break down barriers in education to involve more learners and involve more people. And so while we're not getting rid completely of the way that you learned, we're allowing others to come into the conversation as well, so that we could have a room full of doctors or a room full of engineers, or as you said, 5% in the STEM field is just not enough for the demands and for the path that we are headed in the future. And even if that number stay that size, we're limiting our potential. We're limiting what we could do. And so we're trying to build up further and have a greater capacity by finding other pathways to involve others that might otherwise be discouraged because of the product that we're working on. We're trying to create more of a process that involves others.
I think, too, I would add that just like in traditional science, the way in which we are approaching learning is ever evolving, too. I think that some of the things that we didn't know before, we do know now more, especially as we study how the brain learns and things like that. We don't know everything about everything, and I think that continuing that conversation with the parents would also help the students kind of understand, like, this is just an ever-evolving situation, and we're going to continue to, when we know better, do better kind of situation. I think that would be extremely important to continue to have that conversation with parents as well.
And I think this podcast is like a microcosm of that. We've really embraced the process in how we do the podcast. If you listen to the first couple of podcasts, and even like you can chunk them and you can hear like a different tone, a different personality that has kind of evolved in the actual show. And there's music now, and we keep evolving and it keeps changing.
Too.
And you're here. I was trying to build up to the best part. You beat me to it. But, we very much have embraced the process as well. And also, one of the things that's great about being involved in the process is it allows you to be more timely in your response, right? You can respond to some spontaneous opportunity to learn, or so much of learning happens in the moment. And yet a lot of things we've learned is to actually shut down that moment so that we can keep them on a path. But you might be able to kind of redirect and still allow for that spontaneous learning to happen.
My comments so far have probably been more directed towards administrators or maybe teachers, I guess, who might schedule this parent night. But I'm going to piggyback off something Andrew said about latest brain research. And so I'm pretty old. How old are you, right? So I actually predate standards. When I first started teaching, there were no state standards. There was no test you had to take to become a teacher. And I remember when those things came out, there were teachers in the room who were complaining about it. And my response was, hey, you know what? We want the same respect that doctors and engineers get in this country as teachers. So having a test that we have to take to pass is kind of getting us there a little bit, isn't it? Because doctors have to pass a test, lawyers have to pass a test. So we have to test. We have to be certified. And now we have state standards and a state test. So that's kind of going to help us get the respect that those fields have as well. But just like in those fields, when new things come out, you have to learn them. So as educators, when new pedagogical approaches come out that we know benefit students, just like the doctor has a new surgery to learn that's better for the patient, or a new prescription to write that's better for the patient, if we want the respect that doctors have, then we need to do the same things those fields do, which is stay up to date on the latest and best things out. And I say this because I know that we resist change as human beings, and there are probably lots of teachers listening to this now who are probably saying, you know what, I've been a great teacher teacher for 20 years, and I'm offended by these new standards that shouldn't have to change.
Yeah.
You know, I have kids who come back from college and they tell me how great I've been doing, or from high school who tell me how great I prepared them in middle school. Again, I would ask those teachers, you know, would you go to a doctor who's still prescribing penicillin? Would you go to a doctor that's still cutting open your knee instead of using arthroscopic surgery, simply because, you know, that's the way I've been doing it for a long time, you know, and it still works, so that's the way I'm going to continue to do it? No, we have a greater respect for the physicians that we meet who are up to date on the latest and greatest and are on top of the latest research. And I think likewise in our profession, we need to do the same.
Ron, you are a wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you for coming on the podcast. And I'm going to wrap it up with 3 main takeaways that I have. The first one was for everyone in education, but I did hear you were saying specifically for administrators to be proactive with your communication and with your involvement of this message out to stakeholders. So everyone involved should be aware of why we're doing what we're doing and aware of the impacts that could have. So as much as possible, be proactive. Secondly, you don't have to be a Sith Lord to make Steele's connections within your community. And then last, and I think this is most important for all of our listeners, is that you don't associate good teaching with good telling.
Yeah,
when you said that really stuck with me. I wanted to
wrote that down.
Share that again. So on behalf of the entire Change Ed team, thank you so much, Ron. To get in touch with Ron, to learn more about Activate Learning, or just hear more of all of his amazing stories, be sure to visit our show notes where we have all of Ron's contact information. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And remember to follow, subscribe, tell your friends, tell the people that aren't your friends. Who else?
Check out the website.
Check out our website. What is our website?
learn.mciu.org/changeed. Oh,
thank you.
Dang. I got all excited that I was going to have the last word.
Not today.
No.